Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi. You are still in Abuja. What's going on there? There's something.
Good morning, Dr. Reuben. Yes, still in Abuja, but I'll be seeing you very soon.
There's something I don't know.
Very, very soon. And
Please,
I'll tell you all about it when I get back.
Okay.
Good stuff.
Anyway, good to see you.
Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Vimbai. Let me tell you all what is happening around the world. Now, there have been mixed reactions to French President Emmanuel Macron announcing that France will officially recognize Palestine as a state in September. Now, as expected, Palestinian officials, led by President Mahmoud Abbas, welcomed Macron's decision. Now, Hamas said that it was a step in the right direction and called on all countries to follow France's lead. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the move rewards terror, and that's as the Israel-Hamas war rages on. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says America strongly rejects the so-called reckless move as the Trump administration continues to stand behind its ally Israel during its own attempts to end this war in Gaza. Now, when the formal announcement is made during the United Nations General Assembly in New York this September, France will become the first of the G7, group of 7 major industrialized nations, including the United States, Britain, Canada, Germany, Japan and Italy. They'll be the first among that group to recognize a Palestinian state. Now, currently, the state of Palestine is recognized by more than 140 out of the 193 member nations of the United Nations, which includes some European Union countries, including Spain and the Republic of Ireland. Now, moving on now to East Asian politics or East Asian affairs, where we see at least 14 people, mostly civilians, have been killed as Thai and Cambodian soldiers clash along the border between both countries. Now, the trigger for the clashes this time was a mine explosion along the border on Wednesday that wounded 5 Thai soldiers and led to Bangkok to withdraw its ambassador to Cambodia and expelled Cambodia's own ambassador. Now, the Southeast Asian neighbors do have long-standing border disputes that periodically flare along this 500-mile border, which sometimes involves gunfire. However, the retaliations and the relations, rather, have really deteriorated between both countries recently since this confrontation back in May, where a Cambodian soldier was killed. Now, Thursday's clashes were far bigger in scale and intensity than any of the other usual attacks we've been seeing between these two countries. And you'll remember that we did take the story of Thai Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra, who's been suspended after a phone call between her and a senior Cambodian politician was leaked. She was talking, of course, about a Thai general there. So just another example of the staunch and deteriorating relations happening between Thailand and Cambodia. And finally, back home on the African continent, we do have a story where international politics does coincide with sports, and that's as the former head of the Central African Republic's Football Federation, Patrice Edouard Ngasoma, has been found guilty of committing 28 war crimes and crimes against humanity at the International Criminal Court. Now, he was accused alongside Alfred Yekatom of coordinating attacks against the CAR's Muslim population between 2013 and 2014. Yekatom, who's nicknamed Rambo, was found guilty of 20 charges. Now, the trial lasted almost 4 years and involved more than 170 witnesses and nearly 20,000 items of evidence. The crisis struck the Central African Republic back in 2013 when Muslim rebels from the Seleka group seized power in the majority Christian country. Now, in response, the mostly Christian militias called the Anti-Balaka rose up to counter the Seleka after President Francois Bozizé was ousted. Now, Ingasoma, he was convicted of numerous crimes, including murder, torture, and the persecution of a religious group. Now, prosecutors in this trial say that both men targeted Muslims, calling them enemies of the state as they slaughtered civilians. Now, Ingasoma was acquitted of rape, while Yekatom was also cleared of enlisting children as soldiers. That being said, both men did plead not guilty. They had denied all charges against them, but of course they have been found guilty. Ngasoma was sentenced to 12 years and Yekatom 15 years. Those are your stories around the world. Love to hear your thoughts before we move on to the papers.
Femi, if I'm to close my eyes and you tell a story about Africa without putting the names in there, you can almost predict that the story will be the same across every part of Africa. That's what's happening in Central African Republic. A sit-tight leader, Francois Bozize, was ousted after a long reign. He had a lot of competitors, and Jay Patassi. What happened? The politicians turned it into a religious fight. Seleka and Antibalaka went at loggerheads. Guess what? Their colonial masters got involved. France at some point, they felt France was not fair enough, and the Russians too got involved. Today, the Central African Republic is tilted towards Russia. Mineral resource taken out. One of the culprits found guilty by the ICC. Does it solve the killings that have happened? No, but at least justice has been done. That's the play of Africa everywhere. If you take this same story, extrapolate it to another African country, almost going to be the same parameters. The question is, when will Africa be free? And that's the same story I'd like to extrapolate with what is happening in Thailand and Cambodia. Just like the French and the British caused the problem in the Middle East when they had an agreement called the Sykes and Picot Agreement. They drew a line in the sand. You can read more about that in James Barr's book. The exact thing happened. Panelvier and the Dangreg Mountains. The French came in there, signed a treaty in 1907, drew borders of lands they didn't know about. You see, these colonial bastards are so bloody brazen. They drew borders of land they didn't know about, ceded Panelvier to Cambodia. And since then, they've been fighting. So anytime you have a little trigger, the fight starts again. This trigger was just because of a mine. Then they go at loggerheads. But it's because of the injustices perpetrated way back 1907, where areas around the Dangreg Mountain was pushed into Cambodia, as how the injustices persist, aided and abated by the colonial master. But also the funny thing is the colonial master, we can give them some praise today. Why? Because today, like they caused the problem again in the Middle East with the Sykes and Picot agreements. They divided these areas. Palestinian area, they gave it to the British. They took some other parts. Today now, France has now repented after many years of Sykes and Picot to come and say that, oh, we acknowledge that there must be a two-state solution. We respect Palestinian country. But after the Second World War, when the British ally and the likes of Balfour had the Balfour Declaration that they were ceding the lands that have belonged to Palestine to Israel, there was no problem with it then. I mean, they are saying next person, they have limited. I can't understand the hypocrisy that plays out in the world. Sometimes it gets very scary for me. I have to yield the floor.
All right, very quickly, it's in the Central African Republic. I'll touch on another story that caught my attention, which is that there's some Nigerian miners, video of some Nigerian miners that was circulating because they were stranded there. A group of Chinese employers had recruited them to work in the mines in Central African Republic, and then they were left stranded and their passports were taken away from them. But I believe NIDCOM under Madam Abike Dabiri has stepped in and has said that they will repatriate them from the Central African Republic. But this just goes to show you, I'm using this to exemplify the degree of anarchy that exists, especially when it comes to mineral resources in the Central African Republic to date. So this prosecution, this conviction, some might say that is a welcome development, but What does it really do? Does it repair the systemic issues that we see happening on the ground? Unfortunately, what you see playing out there is the typical case of what happens when blood diamonds are involved. We know that Central African Republic is very rich in diamond minerals, gold as well, and other minerals, but specifically diamonds. We've seen what they've done to Liberia, to Angola, to Congo. And they always come, and I guess that's why they're called blood diamonds, because they come with this, I don't know what to call it, animalistic level of killing and attack and violence between people. And there's no regard for, politicians will bring in religion and they'll bring in a tribe and ethnicity and all of that. But at the end of the day, this is a fight for resources. Now, we know that the north and eastern region, which is known to be the Muslim-dominated region, is said to have been marginalized for so long, which is why the Muslim-dominated Seleka had led the overthrow of the Christian president Bozize. However, even decades later after that, almost a decade later after that, we continue to see that the situation in the Central African Republic is nothing to write home about. So that's why I say, yes, we're glad that this has happened. There's also a member of Seleka, the Seleka group, because they're anti-Balaka. There's also a member of the other group who's waiting to also be sentenced at the ICC. But it doesn't fix the issues that are on the ground that continue to plague this nation and continue to plague many African nations, especially when our resources are involved.
Okay, very quickly. First, let me deal with CAR. Now, I recommend for everybody's reading Mahmoud Mamdani's book, Bad Muslim, Good Muslim, Bad Muslim. That's how the book is titled. Because the major issue that you find in the Central African Republic that has been considered by the ICC is just about how religion plays a major part in African politics. Now, what happened in 2013 was that, in a country, Central African Republic, that is predominantly Christian, Muslims moved in and then removed the president at the time. And then you now have Ngasona and Yenakom. I hope I got the pronunciation right. Yekatom or Yekatom, organizing their own groups to defend the interest of the Christians. Now, the matter went all the way to the International Criminal Court, and now they have been convicted. Yekatom for 15 years, Ngasona for 12 years, principally that they killed people, they committed murder, they committed rape in the case of Yekatom and all of that. That's what the ICC...
Well, they were cleared, yes. I think he was cleared for the rape charge.
No, Ngasona was cleared for the rape charge, but I think Yekatom was convicted. However, both of them were convicted for murder and other atrocities. Now, but the main point that I am trying to make is how religion is a major issue in African politics. And now in the Central African Republic, that led in 2013, February, to the death of up to about 1,000 persons. Now, Ngasona was head of the CAF, of the CAR Football Federation, but they say, well, he became a self-declared political coordinator of what was called the anti-Balaka forces. And then, he had an ally in the other person. However, the big question about the ICC in Africa has been that, okay, why is the ICC always giving judgments against African leaders? Why is it that when it comes to other parts of the world, it's not so efficient? But I just wanted to draw attention to the point about how religion is such a divisive factor, not just in the Central African Republic, but also in Nigeria. And that's why African leaders need to be very careful about the effect of religion. Now, as for France and Palestine, France says it will recognize Palestine in September. Now, this goes back to the two-state solution in 1937, when we had the British Peel Commission. In 1947, 1948, the United Nations decided to create the State of Israel. But since then, there's been crisis. The two-state solution, even in the 1982 Arab Summit, Palestine, under Yasser Arafat, decided to, agree to the decision that it should be a two-state solution in the West Bank, in Gaza, and that region. But the reality of the situation is that you have Israel, which says it does not want Palestine to exist as a state, and you have the Hamas that says that it does not want Israel to exist as a state. This is the main substance of the conflict. But Israel, joining the 140 states recognizing the region that is called Mandatory Palestine, that was agreed upon in 1937 and 1948. This is where the issue lies. The US, Israel, the United Kingdom do not recognize that region of Mandatory Palestine. But what do we want in the world? What we want is peace. And that's why the conflict between Thailand and Cambodia is very important. Thailand and Cambodia, they share historical affinities. They are more or less, the same country, the same people. That's why the president of Thailand, we call the prime minister of Thailand, we call the prime minister of Cambodia, my uncle. But we should note one point. Thaksin Shinawatra, who used to be the prime minister of Thailand, says, no, they should teach Cambodia a lesson. The whole of this conflict at this time is about a UNESCO heritage site, which Thailand says Cambodia says Thailand violated and all of that. But I think from an international perspective, let me not spend too much time discussing Thailand-Cambodia politics. It's simply that we need peace in the world. We are already grappling with the crisis in Sudan, South Sudan, in Iran, in the Middle East generally. So to add Thailand and Cambodia to it, we just escaped from the conflict between India and Pakistan. And I think the thing to say is that good reason should prevail between both countries. It's at the level of clashes, but Thailand is saying it may escalate into war. I hope that important agencies in the world will intervene and ensure that that escalation does not occur.
Well, thank you. We will continue to monitor the situation in Cambodia and Thailand and indeed across the world. Thank you all for your submissions on the World Brief. Let's move on to newspaper headlines across Nigeria and the world. Let's start, of course, with This Day. This Day leads this morning with President Tinubu saying the economy is stable now, despite navigating the difficulty of economic instability beforehand. Now, President Tinubu made those comments during the ruling APC's 14th National Executive Meeting, which took place at the Presidential Villa here in Abuja on Thursday. And for the Nigerians urging for more to be done at the grassroots level, the president told governors to ensure that they wet the grass more, a metaphor he used to illustrate the need for governors to make sure more is being done to reach Nigerians in need. Now, the New Telegraph this morning does leave with the prospect of US tariff negotiations with Nigeria and indeed other African countries and leaders. Experts say that they must show up with the continent's best negotiation plan, especially since Africa's gold, cobalt and lithium, among other resources, is continuing to be attractive to the likes of the United States. It also reports that Professor Yilwat Data has emerged, of course, as the APC's 8th national chairman in 13 years, replacing Abdullahi Ganduje. Now, Yilwat Data's emergence in is on the front page of different newspapers. It's on the front page of the Daily Times and the leadership of Friday's edition of that newspaper. Meanwhile, if we take a look at the Daily Trust, it does lead with Senator Rabiu Kwankwaso, who took Kano State in the last presidential election back in 2023, saying that the president is marginalizing the North in terms of its resource allocation. The Punch pictures both the APC and the PDP's NEC meetings, as its headline says that both parties have set the stage for an epic 2027 general election showdown. Now, the Vanguard reports a federal high court sitting in Lagos has ordered the Inspector General of Police and the Lagos State Commissioner of Police to pay 10 million naira in damages to some of the #EndSARS protesters for violating their fundamental rights. It's a huge amount of justice there. Now, The Guardian reports on the eye-opening prospect of dietary supplements that can potentially be toxic. Moving on to US now, the Washington Post does report that US President Donald Trump, alongside Jerome Powell, they're pictured on the paper's front page as they seem to have disagreed over the cost of the Fed's renovation. The relationship between both men doesn't seem to have been warmed any further in the aftermath. Now to UK papers, and we do have another hard-hitting image on the front page of The Guardian, as the head of the United Nations Agency for Palestine begs for aid to be let in, as his staff, even his staff, are fainting from hunger. The Independent quotes the UN, which says Palestinians have become the walking corpses as they wait for food and medical supplies. The headline says that they are neither dead nor alive. And before we go, the Daily Star does dedicate its front page to the wrestling icon, the Incredible Hulk Hogan, whose real name is Terry Jean Bollea. He did die of a cardiac arrest on Thursday, aged 71. Those are your papers from Nigeria and beyond.
All right, thank you so much, Adefemi. If you were born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s, that Hulk Hogan death really would have hit you hard. Well, thanks so much.